welcome to the Mime Radio Show podcast. I'm Karen Hoyer.
And I'm James Donlin.
And our guest today is Elizabeth Bolick. And it's a very special interview because my dear friend Liz and I met at the very beginning of our artistic lives when we were both students at the North Carolina School of the Arts. And both of us were very inspired by our mime teacher there, and that is you, James Donlin. So let me read to you a little bit about Liz Bolick and her incredibly varied career. Liz is an accomplished mime, clown, variety entertainer, juggler, puppeteer, makeup artist, designer, and therapeutic clown doctor. She has produced, directed, written, and performed hundreds of shows all over the world in every venue imaginable, including the Lincoln Center, the Kennedy Center for the Arts, Carnegie Hall, the Metropolitan Opera, La Mama, Art Park, New York International Clown Theater Festival, the International Clown Festivals in China and Japan, and at the Cape Playhouse, the DuPont Theater, the Palace Theater, the Brooklyn Children's Museum, hundreds of schools, libraries, and corporate events. Liz worked as Dr. Sneakers for over 30 years with the Big Apple Circus Clown Care Unit, where she received the prestigious Raoul Wallenberg Humanitarian Award for her work with critically ill children. Other credits include Healthy Humor, the Super Scientific Circus, Paul Newman's Hole in the Wall Gang Camp, and the Grand Falloons at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and her newest original show, the Flip Flop Circus. Liz has also brought her extraordinary face painting expertise to events all over the world, training art students in her unique style. Currently, Liz is a teaching artist with the New Victory Theater, developing curriculum for schools based on the shows touring that stage. Liz also recently began her 100th career as an audio transcriber for Circus Omnium, the Big Apple Circus, and the Signature Theater, describing live shows for blind audiences. And then in all her extra spare time, she produces and designs special events with her own company, Miss Liz Events. Whew.
She should interview us, don't you think?
Yeah, she's done it all. Let's welcome Liz Bolick. Yeah.
Hello, Liz. Wow. Can you, before we start, I'm curious about the thing over your right shoulder, the hat and the little stand. What is that? Have a particular significance?
I design hats for my clown characters. So this is one of them. I always kind of do a very sort of glamour clown look.
Wow.
So I use a lot of feathers. I think I was a bird in a past life.
You know, before we really get into this, how do you're such an eclectic woman. How do you order your world to be able to accomplish all these things that Karen was writing about or reading? Like, what does your brain do to kind of be in contact with all these different facets of your creativity and talent?
Well, usually when they all overlap, which is rare, it gets really crazy. Like it's almost too much. I try to kind of do them in segments or waves. Like I'll do one thing for a period of time, and then I'll do another thing for a period of time. But I had to learn how to start saying no and get some free time in my life because
I know you're a juggler. So is this a form of juggling? I mean, while you're doing one thing, are you thinking about another thing in the back of your mind? Is your navigation brain always engaged about where you are and what's next?
I'm definitely a multitasker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'd have to be.
You must be.
One time a friend of mine came and stayed at my house for a week, and she watched me do a different thing every single day. Like one day I packed for a show. The second day I packed for an airbrushing makeup gig. The third day I packed for a teaching gig. The next day I was writing and doing contracts. And she was just watching me like, yeah.
So you've produced and you've performed and you've written and you've taught, you've done all the greatest hits of a teacher, artist, creator, performer. So now, speaking about just the performance for a moment, right before you go on stage, the split seconds before you enter in front of the public, what's going through your mind?
I try to breathe and shut my brain off.
Oh, that makes sense.
Like I did some South Korean yoga. I tap to get into my body, because to be a performer, I have to go into my body and leave my brain out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just try, my brain doesn't help me at all. I have to. So I do a lot of physical tapping and warming up. Some of the exercises you taught us. I have to.
Yeah. So I mean, in that period, let's say a half hour before the moment where you empty your brain, what are the kind of things that you're doing to get mentally and physically ready?
Stretching, breathing, but really a lot of tapping. And I just try to forget everything.
Oh, you mean this kind of tapping, not like with the feet? Yeah.
Physically tapping to ground myself.
What part of your body do you not tap on?
Well, my knee kind of hurts these days. The lower part of your spine is where anxiety and sort of nerves are, like your kidneys. So if you tap that, it sort of gets rid of nerves. And the lower belly is like the sort of yoga thing that you tap.
But is there one place, like right here or right there or right there, you don't tap?
I'll tap.
So what is your relationship with the audience, Liz? Like, how do you see, like, do you ever peek through the curtain at the audience if you're doing a show, or the metaphorical curtain? Do you want to see your audience before you go on, and do you want it to be a surprise?
Oh, I definitely peek. I want to know who's out there. And also because I use a lot of audience in my show, my solo show, especially, I bring people up on stage. So sometimes I try to see who's like in the front, like kind of read the audience. Like, is there somebody I could bring up? Because that's always tricky to bring audience members.
Yeah. How do you, like, let's say, we're kind of jumping all over the place now, but let's say you have a participant up on stage. How do you get rid of them if they're not doing the right thing? Or what's your process towards somebody that's stubborn? Because all of us that have done, participatory performance, which is a mainstay of classic clowning, how do you deal with that you need, because I peek too, and I learn a lot about who's out there by watching, through the curtain. But when there's somebody that's stubborn, what's your plan of action when it's not going the way you want it to go?
It can really wreck a show. It can really wreck a piece when you have a stubborn person. But I find like being really still and double taking them a lot, like just sort of using the audience to get them to kind of loosen up. Like, you don't want to embarrass them, but you also kind of have to play the moment. You have to be present. Like, this isn't working. Person, and maybe tease them a little bit, or you have to find a way to draw them out without embarrassing them.
Yeah.
Do you truthful to the audience that it's not working in the moment?
Yeah. So do you think of your audience as they're your partners right from the beginning, or do you have to lure them into being your partners, or are they already your friends, or do you have to make friends with them?
Most of my shows are silent, and I always open the show with a silent kind of parasol piece that I wrote with James. Actually, it's an umbrella mime piece, so it's very quiet. And I find that it's very quiet. And sometimes I get a little freaked out by the quiet and stillness. But I find if I do a visual thing very quietly, it goes on for almost 3 minutes. Then I start to warm up. I get in my body and I bring them in kind of quietly to start. And then I try to build it kind of a rhythm as I go.
What about for the events, not the performance events that you've that's part of your life as an artist. So what about those organizational events? Let's say you have to go to a board meeting to do a pitch, or, you're meeting a group of artists that are going to work for you on some of your projects. Do you empty your brain there, or do you fill your brain? I mean, is there a different approach before you meet the public or meet the audience in a different format? How does that differ?
I have to be super prepared in my brain for that type of thing, especially board members, like money people, corporate people, because I don't have a great memory with numbers and figures. So I do a lot of practice. I have a lot of notes. I do a lot of research about who I'm meeting. It's entertainers and other performers. I feel very comfortable with the artists. With the artists, I just try to give them a lot of love and make them feel confident and happy and make them feel safe. But also when I'm doing a pitch, I also make sure it's like 5 minutes long. Like I never go in and do a long drawn out thing. I was like famous for like, this is what I do. Photos, blah, blah, blah. And then,
you know, in your stage show, you said you had a parasol piece that served a purpose. Is there some kind of process in this other situation that you rely on to break the ice or to introduce yourself to a group of strangers that may want to hire you? Is there a different conceptual approach, or is there kind of the same concept?
Yeah. What's your hook there with the corporate people?
I look a lot smarter than I am. I mean, I'm very tall and I appeared to know what I was doing, even when I have no idea. So in a way, I'm a really great liar. Not that I lie, but I mean, I can talk up something that I don't really understand necessarily. I'm a pretty good salesperson with like humor. I still use humor. I use gesture, obviously, and I'm a very strong personality. So I kind of try to wow them with humor and charm more than facts. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
My imagination. I have a really good imagination. So you have to make these corporate people see somehow because they don't have a lot of imagination.
Is there a costume you wear in those situations? You know, is there a kind of a look that you feel is successful for you, or?
It's like an artsy, casual, chic-y thing.
But you also, like, when you talk about it, it's clear that you're using your mime skills as to present this person of authority that is going to make their life wonderful, that you're using your body language, which is what we do as mimes, just to project this image that they're going to say, oh yeah, let's hire her, right?
Yeah, it's an act, it's a character.
Yeah.
It's the corporate life.
We'll get more into that world, I think, a little later. Can you talk to us a little bit about your influences and your source? Like, how did you come to this world that you've been so accomplished in over all these years?
Yeah, maybe go all the way back to like, how did you, we all met each other at North Carolina School of the Arts and we were studying theater, and what brought you to there, and what happened? How did your life go in which directions after that?
Well, it's interesting because I was doing theater really young. I was doing creative drama and classes and community theater as a kid. I studied dance and tap. I also played tennis and swimming, so I was very physical. And then I hated high school, so my last year, I graduated high school in 3 years, and I got a job at McCarter Theater. So my really first influences were McCarter Theater, which is this beautiful regional theater in Princeton. And I worked backstage doing anything they would let me do, and I got to watch all these great Broadway actors from the background, like Vincent Price and Roddy McDowall and all these wonderful, amazing, big stars. And I was backstage just like soaking it in. Mm-hmm. And I also worked in the scene shop, or I did costumes for them. I would do any job they wanted me to do. And then I ended up going on the road for a year, working with Vincent Price and Roddy McDowall as like their understudy for the women in the show. Like that was School of the Arts. Like I was a kid, I was 17, 18. And so I watched all these masters, and I loved the theater, but they were also like Roddy McDowall and Vincent Price. They were physical comic. They were so physically brilliant with their voices were beautiful. So that sort of started, but I sort of simultaneously, I was working in the scene shop, painting scenery and doing acting and doing kind of costume design. I sort of was always doing all these things from a very young age. I drew, I did sports, I painted, I acted. So I've always kind of had a wide range. And then when we went to School of the Arts, and of course, James blew my mind.
Yeah, like he did for many people.
I mean, I thought I was going to go into real theater, but then seeing like James's work on stage with the masks and the clown, suddenly seeing a real clown character. like that evolve, it really made me so excited. And to have someone nurture the physical comedy side of myself made me really grow in that area.
It's also the world, the world of mime and clown, because we say, a good mime is a good clown and a good clown is a good mime. Those worlds really, address who you are in terms of those talents you just described with, creating things with your hands and the visual art concept and the performance. All that is mixed into this genre,
Yeah. And I've just been really lucky. I've just, whenever I needed a teacher or just a lot of opportunities opened up to me. When I first got to New York, I was just auditioning for plays and there were thousands of women and I could never get a part in an act in a show. And I started juggling on the streets. I was a street performer juggling. And this guy named Jay Green walked up to me and hired me immediately to start working up in nightclubs and doing, like, as a magician's assistant. I was like a juggler's assistant. All of a sudden I have full orchestras behind me and I'm doing a nightclub show with this juggler and we're opening for Rodney Dangerfield. How did this happen? And then I got hired by Chipwich to create like Susie Chipwich Girl. So now I'm juggling, I'm touring the whole country, producing, juggling a product and selling a product, but I was still performing. But they paid me all this money as a juggler. And I was like, wow. And then, so one thing led to another. And I was able to make a living as an artist doing all these different things, which I think is very rare. I didn't have to wait tables. I didn't have to I never had a job. Like I always laugh, say I forgot to get a job. And then someone would say, can you airbrush 3 giraffes at this event? And I'd go, sure. And I would buy an airbrush and figure it out.
So what kept you from, in the School of the Arts, which is a very classical dramatic training, where all the students were being trained to be actors in stage and TV and film, but mostly stage at that time. So what drew you to these other areas away from the career of the typical actor after those years of training in North Carolina?
Well, it was very hard to get paid to be an actor, number one. And I had to support myself. I was supporting myself in New York City, which is very expensive. But also I found more freedom as an artist not talking. I felt like I really opened up. I was funnier.
Isn't that interesting? Because most drama schools, drama departments worldwide, that's such an interesting thing you just said. It's all about the words most of the time. And it's the other side of it is like the mime or the profession of performing without words, which actually is very common in other parts of the world beside the United States. I wouldn't say very common, but physical theater and more adventurous theater that doesn't rely on words is very present in world theater, less so than the English speaking theater,
And the other thing is that I've always admired your voice. I always thought you had this beautiful sort of musical quality to your voice. And you had that even when you were a student. And for you, that's one of my questions is like, if you had such a gorgeous speaking voice, why did you choose to be silent?
I mean, there were moments where I did trade shows and other work where I used my voice. I just on stage as an artist feeling free, the less I spoke, the better I was. The funnier I was, the more I was into the flow, the more I could communicate with an audience so much better.
Yeah.
Than having these, I think maybe part of it was them trying to say someone else's words. Remember them, it wasn't as real to me. I don't know.
Well, it's also sort of connected to what you're doing currently, where you are you're sort of returning to your voice, doing these audio interpretations of live theater for visually impaired. So like you're going from being just the movement to being just the voice. And what is that transition like for you as a performer?
Well, first of all, I'm getting older. So after all my knee and, hip transplants and whatever, but I love going back to the voice because I'm using my knowledge of circus, but it's only my voice. I don't have to perform. So it's really great to be able to use my voice as I'm aging. It's a different skill entirely. And I'm fascinated by what other people are doing on stage, right? So I get to describe, I'm using design, I'm using the lighting, I'm using the set, I'm using what I know about the acts and what I know about the acrobatics and the juggling. I'm sort of putting that knowledge into describing what they're doing in the moment. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so somehow that came to me too, where someone said, would you describe the Big Apple Circus? And I went, okay. I'd never done it, but I took a class in audio description, and I'd worked with blind and deaf kids. I'd done shows for them. So it also was fascinating to be able to try to make them see the show, right? And so through my voice, I can make the excitement and the thrill of what's happening on stage real for them, which really warms your heart, especially to have parents come up to you afterwards, or kids come up to you, have blind children come up to you afterwards and go, wow, the show was amazing. And they didn't see a thing, right?
Yeah.
With their eyes. So it's brand new. I mean, I feel like a baby. I've only been doing it like 3 years, but it is a funny circle to go back.
I have a question. So this is getting into another part of another territory, which is related to what you're talking about. So throughout, I know dramatic training or dramatic exposure or theater exposure in the United States with young people, there's always the premise that you're generating an audience for the future. That you're creating minds that are very alive and curious, that will want to watch dramatic art or be interested in the arts in the future. And yet there seems to be something that happens when the child becomes an adult, because we don't have a thriving culture here of the arts, I mean, it's pretty strong, but it's not thriving in the Greek, sort of philosophy of, the Renaissance person, So what do you think happens, like you're describing, these events and, with the New Victory Theater and other ways, was this infusion of the beautiful creative sources and self that a human should feel, then something happens. Like, do you have a theory on that? Like why there sometimes these efforts to cultivate an artistic society kind of go flat at some point? Is there any kind of thing that people should be doing differently, or is that just human nature, or is it about just eating and surviving in the end? You know what I'm saying? So,
well, I mean, I think a lot of artists have to give up their work because they can't survive, because in our country, especially, we're not supported. I would have loved to have had a beautiful studio and just created original work my entire life if I had a choice to have like a beautiful studio, but I couldn't afford it. So I think a lot of artists aren't. I think there isn't I was very lucky because I could make a living, but a lot of artists also don't have a side to their brain that they could do both or be more flexible or find.
It's that juggler brain again, that multitasker.
I think creating is one thing, but then being able to have it go out into the world is another. How do you get from the creation to the production to to people seeing it, right?
So what would be your secret? You've been incredibly successful as one who has taken her love and her talent with the arts into this kind of place where you can make money, and that it does serve a purpose for the general society. How do you, what's the key to that transition?
Hard work.
Yes, you make it
hard. A lot of hours, a lot of time, and also building relationships with people. Like I was very lucky, and I would do one event, and then I didn't really market myself. Somebody would say, wow, this is cool. And then somebody else would hire me, and then the next person. Because I believe in, if you really put out something of high quality that's really meaningful and you put your heart into it, I found that more would come. Because people trusted me artistically to do something interesting and different. Then they realized I was worth the money, because I I was going to work 10 times harder than the next person. And then I always brought in amazing talent. Like I never settled for less than something really special. And it didn't matter if it was for a bar mitzvah or for a corporation or for a stage show. I feel like if I would bring myself to it fully, if I took it on, you could trust me that it would be magnificent at the end. If you know, I mean, not always, sometimes you blew stuff, but generally the quality would be really good.
Have you ever known an audience or a group that you've prepared something for that didn't like good physical theater if it's well done? I mean, to me, it seems most of the time when physical theater is well done, people like it, but then they have short memories very often, you know, because of our culture keeps saying, no, you should be doing this, or I have to do this. But, you know, what's your feeling on that? I mean, good physical theater, from my viewpoint, it succeeds almost all the time in the moment. I guess the key is how do you keep it, you know, progressing beyond the moment of that time, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I always find that it worked. I mean, I think you hit yourself on the head and you fall down, then it just works. I mean, it's the class. I always go back to slapstick. There's just, I mean, it's from the beginning of time. To me, it always works. I mean, I'm not saying that people necessarily understand it all as well now.
Yeah.
But I think if you do it for a 5-year-old now and you do it for a 50-year-old now, the same thing makes them laugh. Classic, stick to classic comedy. I think it always works.
But I also think that in describing all the different kinds of like events, and you are building an audience in all sorts of different ways, different venues. You're not just saying, I only perform in a black box theater for an audience of 50, but you do all different things. So it's sort of like that's a possible solution for getting the arts out there, is to find unusual places to perform, whether it's at a party or an outdoor event or a theater.
Yeah, you have to kind of be a chameleon. You know, like when the South Street Seaport opened, first I was just a juggler there. And then they said, well, we want to do a historical moment and it was all, so I researched like the 1850s and I brought in like all these actors in 1850s Dickensian costumes and we did live theater all over the South Street Seaport. So that was a theatrical bit, and we'd open in tableau, Frozen. We did a lot of mannequin Frozen, but in full 1850s costumes, which I designed and built with my mother's help. But gorgeous velvets and top hat and tails. And then we did like a Christmas Carol with 3 people, and we would do Gift of the Magi, but all street theater. So that was a theatrical event with mime and actors, but in an outdoor environment. It was in the middle of the winter. So it was beautiful, right? Another example is the Baltimore Aquarium called me. They said, we heard you do weird, crazy things. We're opening the Baltimore Aquarium. What can you do? So I brought in people in wetsuits juggling fish. I did a flamingo costume and I had a penguin suit and, you know, I had all these crazy jugglers and actors and we opened the Baltimore Aquarium. We're running around trying to get people to jump in the shark tank. You know, we were like, all like really crazy improv. But they
crazy.
have this reputation of being able to do zany things, you know, that were artistic but wild and crazy and out of the norm, right?
Did you ever feel you were, you know, the old cliche, selling out? I mean, how would you keep your artistic soul with integrity? You know, I mean, you know, what's the secret there to be able to have these experiences, but still to be true to your artistic self? Because that's such a challenge for artists. At some point, all artists have to make a decision, you know, like what the balance is, right? Or what direction to go in to eat, you know?
I was a clown doctor for 30 years. So,
explain that more. Like how do you mean?
Well, Karen understands. So being a therapeutic clown doctor was where my soul lived. So we visited children in hospitals. I visited children in hospitals starting in the early 80s, 3 days a week during the day. And then and we were bedside doing magic or juggling, and we were in cancer wards. I worked with AIDS children. I worked with kids who come out of surgeries. You know, Karen's done this work. You know, you're dealing with trauma. You know, that fulfilled my sort of an artistic sense, and I was making a difference to these families and kids who were sometimes very, very sick. And that always sort of kept me grounded and made me appreciate my art in a different way. Because that I was doing to help people feel better who
Yeah.
need it, as opposed to working for rich people over here or corporations over here. I always had to have that.
Yeah.
Part of my soul kept alive with that.
And
And
the other aspect of that particular part of the work too is that when we talk about performing for sick children, people are always like, oh, that must be so hard. But actually living in the moment with the kid and doing whatever is needed in that moment is for an artist, it's incredibly exciting. It's like improvisation, and you learn all these different kinds of skills that you can throw into the bag, but you're living in the moment with these kids, and it's incredibly fulfilling. So I can see how you mentioned that as the thing that kept your artistic soul alive while you were, wowing the corporate events market too.
You guys were pioneers in this kind of work, weren't you? I mean, both of you started in the 80s, I guess.
Mhm.
So that's
No, I
40
didn't.
years ago. I mean, at that time, what was it like at that time? The clown work in the hospitals and the medical clowning, and then
because James, I didn't do it from the beginning. Liz pulled me in when we opened a place in Chicago. So I'm really curious, how was it? What was it like in the very beginning?
Well, I was I call it the first dozen people. So we were the first ones really in the world. Michael Christensen started it with the Big Apple Circus, and he started auditioning clowns, and we just went into the hospitals and sort of went for it. We had really no training. We were really, it took a lot of courage. I got to tell you, quite frankly, because you're thrown into situations with tubes and this and that going on, and doctors coming in and parents coming in, and we just kind of jumped in and to see, and we were kind of anarchists, because what we're doing, you're not supposed to be funny in a hospital. You're not supposed to make jokes in a hospital. Everybody's really quiet. There's all this serious stuff. And we would just take toilet paper rolls and start throwing them down the hallways, and and elevator doors would open, and we'd be standing there like these crazy clowns, and people would be like, and we'd grab them, put them in the elevator and start, it was really kind of a wild, wild west.
Mm-hmm.
The amazing things, there were great people doing it. Some of the most brilliant clowns in the world, Jeff Gordon, John Lepiarts, these clowns. I got to Todd Robbins. I don't know if you know any of these people, but Dickie Ellis. You worked with partners, and they were all really brilliant people. I always felt like in awe of being able to be in the room with them, because it takes a mature person, but it also takes somebody who's willing to just kind of, anything could happen at any moment.
So in some ways, this is like the source of clown, is this ability to contact individuals like this with this kind of honesty and anarchy. I mean, it's the heart of the clown right there. Yeah. And how has that work changed over the years? I mean, this is a very interesting question, because you change, the perception of the work changes, the culture changes, the perception from the professionals, from the medical profession changes.
Yeah.
What are some of the, just in a nutshell, some of the transformations that have happened over this 30, 40 years,
Well, now it's all over the world, in hospitals in almost every country in the world. It's in Paris, it's in South America, it's in Israel. There's clown doctors everywhere. And now there's a school that's being opened so people can get a degree in it. And I believe, was it Helen Donnelly that started the school in Canada?
Yes.
The medical community started, and I was involved in some of this, started actually documenting and proving that the work that we did helped heal children, that the healing worked. And now it's been documented. It's been in medical journals, and there's documentaries being made as we speak. And so it's going to be an accredited career now, being a clown.
Amazing.
Yeah,
but it still has that aspect of clowns in the hospital is still an unusual and welcome thing for the families.
And it's really being an anarchist. I mean,
I would think it was even needed even more now, because medical profession now, I mean, you go to a doctor's office, the guy's looking at the computer most of the time. Your doctor, this human connection is a little different now. I mean, it's all computer and oh, here's a formula that I see here and do that. And, but so this richness of humanity that the clown doctors provide seems like it would be even more valuable today.
You force the doctors to engage. Like, you can only go so far because some of them will be like, but you kind of make them engage, and you try to draw the nurses in. And sometimes you're doing something crazy in the hallway and you'll look and the whole staff. So really a lot of what you're doing is helping the staff. Mm-hmm. And like, I taught some doctors how to juggle, and it got to the point where it really changed the whole environment of the hospital. The staff looked forward to us. And they would get in on the action sometimes. Like we could use their phones and sometimes make phone calls, and I'd get the nurses involved, or we'd set up like a chair, and you tell the doctor to go sit on the fart thing on the chair. Just set up the staff to play with you,
Yeah. Plus, it's that whole thing about clowns, like from way back when the jester was allowed to make fun of the king. We are taking the authority figures of the doctors and poking fun at them by mimicking all of their, know-it-all habits and things like that.
How did Dr. Sneaker change over the years? Dr. Sneaker, right, is your name?
Yeah. Well, she's always very glamorous. She has high top glamorous sneakers, and I don't think she changed that much. I think maybe I got wilder and wilder. I was always in trouble. I was always like, I had to, over the year, I'll tell you how I changed. Let me think about that. I had to become more of a white clown. Okay. The Auguste, I was really more of an Auguste when I started, and I became more of a white clown because the partner that I worked with at Yale, Leo, who, Dr. Chester Drawers, very Auguste. And so I had to really, really grow into my white clown and let him get the laughs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In that way over the years.
Yeah. And that's your role with Therese when you do your flip-flop circus. You're like the one, she's the mischievous one, and you're the one that's always like, why can't you behave? Kind of.
It took me a long time to grow into that, to accept that was still creating the comedy, right?
Yes. I think that's hard to be the number one. I think it's hard to be the number one, the authority, when you think that the number two has all the fun, being the mischievous one, right?
How do you, after a day of, a rigorous day like this in the hospital, how do you leave it at your own doorstep when you come home? Does that come back to the juggler brain again? You were able to put it in perspective. I mean, I'm sure you've met some or encountered some very powerful moments, emotional and physical moments that you have to process to not escape, but just to put it in a place so you can continue, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to learn how to grieve, and you have to learn to process the emotion. So I would often cry it out on the ride home, or I'd play loud music and dance it out. I was very lucky with the partnerships that I had, like I'm sure Karen is, that we would, if something really bad happened during the day or really intense, we would stop, we'd talk it out. We could even leave for the day if it was too much, because you do count. I mean, it's very emotional. I have a lot of little souls in here. There's a lot of laughter and joy, but you lose a lot of children. So, and sometimes you'd go back to the hospital and you didn't know if the kid was gone. Well, were they? So I would have to be like, they're fine. Like, I didn't ask a lot of questions. I didn't want to know too many details about the illness or what happened to them or where they ended up. The less information and factual medical information I had was better for me to do the work, because then I could just work from a more joyful place, just to try to create joy and not carry the knowledge of what was happening so much. And different clowns work different ways, but the less I knew, the better I was able to do that job.
Did you feel the work inspired you in other aspects of your career? Did that kind of work like fuel ideas or emotions in the other things that you did?
Well, I started volunteering for the vets. So now I work for a lot of different veterans organizations, entertaining families and kids at events. I started doing a lot more service, entertainment, charitable stuff. I think it made all my work deeper, because you so appreciate the little things, and you're so much more appreciative. I think everything got deeper in my world because of that work. in every way.
Oh,
Yes.
oh, it's
Time
time.
for our mime line.
It's time for the gift.
So Liz, did you receive a gift in the mail? Oh, what did you get? A package?
I got a package. And it says, please wait to open this package while on the Mime Radio Show podcast.
Well, now's the time. That was the theme music, and now it's
Let's see. I love presents. I can open it though. Who packed?
It's the Mime Museum, the staff at the Mime Museum.
Yes, the Mime Museum has got, a lot of extra stuff. We're just trying to, clear out some space. Ooh, what does it say, Miss Liz?
It says, this box, oh, great. This box contains the original spec by Liz Bolick, Karen Hoyer, Corey Madden, and Pat Land during early mime performances at North Carolina School of the Arts. Is it in here?
Yeah, it's in there. Don't let it go.
That's fantastic.
Bring it out. Show the viewers.
Oh, it's the spec.
Bring it out. Yeah.
Ah.
Oh, okay.
Oh. Now it's gone. Until maybe you have.
No, the spec never disappears. The spec will always return.
She's probably gonna.
We don't know which entrance
amazing.
it'll make, though. We'll stop at that. Yeah.
Do you remember that piece?
I do.
Yeah.
When I teach.
Oh, you do. So you teach the kids how to play with the spec, make the spec get bigger and smaller.
The point in space, the almighty point in space.
Tell us a little bit about your teaching.
Well,
what's your favorite thing to teach? What kind of workshop do you like to teach?
I like to teach mime.
Yeah.
I love. Kids think it's really new. They don't know anything about it, and it's like bringing it to a whole new generation.
Interesting. So are you able to incorporate like some mime workshops when you're working for, like, say, the New Victory Theater when they have a show come in? Are you like trying to stick mime in there someplace? I
am all the time. And like they'll have different shows coming in. So they'll usually put me on a show that's a clown circus show or shows. A lot of magicians do some mime. There's some different acts from all over the world. And if there's mime or magic or juggling on that curriculum development, they kind of give people their, strong suits. I always try to bring in physicality somewhere because the kids sit all day. But it's kind of cool. It uses the other part of my brain because you have to base it on the show. So whatever the theme of the show is, you draw from that, you research the cast, and then you build a curriculum. So they talk about the show with the kids, and they go see the show, and then you do a workshop after the show.
Explain briefly what the New Victory Theater does in New York City.
They bring in international children's shows, theater companies, circus companies, opera companies from all over the world. And then they perform on the stage for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And then the New Vic sends teaching artists out into the community all over Manhattan and the Bronx and the boroughs to schools that have no arts programs. So we work with a lot of underprivileged kids and schools, and New Vic funds it. So they pay us to go out into the world. We do one-off workshops. But the New 42 is a wonderful organization. They hire actors, musicians, dancers, writers, mimes to go out into the schools, and it's wonderful.
So sometimes the kids are coming into the theater to see a show, and other times you all are going out to their space.
Yeah, almost all the kids are invited. All the schools are invited, either for free or for very affordable tickets to come to the shows. So the workshops are really based on them seeing the show.
Can you talk just briefly about the value of these experiences for kids? Because in our country, the arts are being defunded in many different places. And what's your feeling about arts for kids, just in general? Which affects the society, of course.
It's so important because I think so many kids learn in different ways. So some kids are very visual. Some kids do better like reading. Some kids do better. Some kids are very shy. So, there are a lot of special needs kids or kids that are differently abled these days, and they're all mixed together in one group. So the arts, I think, can reach everybody in a different way. I think it's really important.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not enough of it. And you can really draw kids out, literally, through either visual arts or music or dance. A lot of kids suddenly the shyest kid in the room will break into a hip hop dance all of a sudden. Where did that come from? Because they were given a safe space to create or do something.
Have you ever been approached, or have you had interest in being you are an advocate for the arts, but has the government sector or the political sector ever approached you to be, like, for example, the head of the National Endowment for the Arts, for example, or have you ever wanted to go to Congress and lobby for more support of the arts? Why would that not interest you? Seeing how you've done all these other things.
I feel like I just have to reach people, the ones that I can, government, I can't.
Yeah. What are some of the disaster stories you may have had? Can you share a disaster story in your many experiences, that whether it was a costume splitting at the wrong moment, or falling off the stage, or you got the wrong pizza the night before? Can you think of the rain came right down through the center stage? Like, can you think of something that's happened to you that's totally, you had to really juggle to conquer?
Well, when I was really young, I got hired to be the Easter duck at the White House. Okay.
Easter duck? What?
Really?
I had a big head Easter duck. There were 100 actors in these costumes, and Ronald Reagan and Nancy were president. And we were on stage because we were with the Paz Easter egg company. And we were doing a little dance on the stage. And one of the women in the show, who was Lamb Chops or Lammy, she got turned around and she fell off the stage. This dance kick, and I grabbed her, and she's flailing, going backwards, and fell off the stage. But also, I got so claustrophobic that I had to get the head off. I thought I was going to die because it was so I tore off across the White House lawn. You see this duck streaking. And I got into this pile of bushes, and I ripped the head off, and I'm like, because the kids couldn't see me out of the costume.
So that you weren't being jumped on by FBI or CIA people.
Sure. I mean, everybody, my handlers were like, where the hell did she go? Range is weird. And I never did a big head costume again. That was.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. My goodness. Wow.
I still laugh.
What's your favorite place that you've, a place you've gone? Like, what are some, a place you really enjoyed the experience in your worldwide travelers?
Yeah, like specifically a place you've gone for work.
Oh.
Somewhere in the world. What was your favorite place?
Japan.
Huh? Yeah, why?
Japan. The audiences I did a 6-week tour there as a mime in these beautiful Pierrot costumes with fans with my partner Everett. And we got to do really lyrical, beautiful, quiet work. It was very, very, for me artistically, it was some of the calmest, most beautiful, because you could take your time in Japan. They were really, it was a gentler kind of thing. They weren't into big slapstick. So we really changed the show and brought it down. It was very pretty and lyrical.
Yeah.
And I go into the mountains and see all the temples.
Yeah, that's the thing that's so interesting
lovely.
about Japanese. It's so, the Japanese classical art forms, there's so much precision and form, but also there's a meditative quality, but also a very in-your-face quality that can happen. Like kabuki versus no theater is night and day, but there's this aesthetic, but there's this time to kind of feel what's going on, so what you're describing makes total sense.
So, but Liz, you've traveled a lot. You've gone lots of different places. So how is it different to experience a country when you're going there to perform, or when you're just there for vacation? And how is it different? And which do you prefer?
Vacation.
How did I know that?
I love my work, but give me a month in Bali and I'm happy.
Here's a question. How does one, we're all aging artists, right? It's inevitable. How have you had to adapt over the years, or how does one approach, a physical theater artist approach those advancing years? How do you, transform, adapt? What are some of the secrets and methods that you've encountered, or you would recommend that people think about?
Well, I can't throw myself around the stage as much as I used to. That's for sure. So I let Therese do that, my partner.
Oh, get somebody younger or more physical.
Older than me, but she's in better. Physically, she hasn't had the serious. I've had to have like hip and knee replacements like an old football player because of all the work I've done. I have some arthritis. But I don't know. I got more into puppets as I'm writing this new show, which I'm much more still and Therese running around me. So again, I think the white clown, and also I'm booking younger people. I'm supporting younger artists, and I'm creating the shows and helping other people. I'm mentoring and trying to help others make a living.
Yeah, maybe the aging artist does come up into here, and they share this.
Yeah.
All the source becomes here,
I'm really curious about this aspect that the three of us have been involved with, which is the creating side. We're performer creators. As a mime, we're always writing shows. We're coming up with an idea, figuring out how to bring that idea into a physical space and having it have a beginning, a middle, and end, a story, and then figuring out places where it can be performed. So that kind of drive, have you felt that throughout your career? Does it ebb and flow, or is it always strong? Or how do you see that aspect of you as an artist throughout your career?
I have always been super driven. I think only now, right now, if someone said to me, I think this is I think the pandemic did that I finally calmed down and had the quietest 2 years of my life where I wasn't creating.
Uh-huh.
And at first it was so weird. I thought I was going to die. Like I was just like, what do I do? And now, then I started to really appreciate not having to create all the time. Like I'm at a place now where I'm like, oh, it's okay. Look at all I've done.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I left Clown Care, it was a huge, very painful, emotional decision. But I went, I have enough. I've done it. It's okay. Like I think at this point I'm starting to let go. But I was always super madly driven, and I think all of us are. I think because as mimes and as writers and as the creators that we are, we had to write, direct, produce, star in, and sell the show. Right? Yeah. Load the car, build the costumes. It wasn't like we just showed up to a film set. Right. And it was all done. And I think that's
does this make you think about your legacy, or is that not important to you? Talking about aging and, where does an artist come to at some point? How does that apply to you?
I mean, I guess if I've made people laugh, I'm good with that.
What's that?
If I brought joy to some people, I'm good with that.
It's a good legacy, I think. Yeah. Do you have any advice for young artists?
Yeah.
Get someone else to load your car.
have a roadie with you, right?
That's
where would one go to do what you did? Where would a young person, what experiences, what schools, what meditations? I see that there's a spiritual figure over your left shoulder. That, like, where does one as a young person want to be like Elizabeth Bolick?
Study at North Carolina School of the Arts with James.
Still?
Sharon Hoyer and Pat Lynn. I couldn't have had a better beginning. I cherish that time, and I'm not kidding.
What was that experience then for you?
It just was like freedom to really experiment, have studio and creative license, and work with people, like you allowed us to, and inspired us to figure out who we were and what we were doing. And we wrote, we physically got really fit. I mean, you have to, I mean, I don't think there's any way around it. I think you have to learn your technique. Whether I think everyone should really just study with people when you're young,
Yeah, yeah.
and then say yes. I said yes to a lot of experiences. I wasn't sure how I was gonna. I would say yes and then figure it out.
And the more design career in conjunction with performance that you've enjoyed, like where would one, does that come as a natural, if the one has those aspirations, or does that come naturally if you say yes and you work hard and you're fit? And is that like, that's what happens, or what would be your,
I mean, I was
thoughts?
self-taught. I never took an art class in my life, and I've done design my whole life. So
how do you explain that?
I don't know.
No, try. That's an interesting question, because a lot of accomplished artists are, in quotes, self-taught. A lot of them are. So
I think I watched a lot of people, like I met a person who was doing face painting again at the South Street Seaport. And I said, how do you do that? And I picked up a palette and I just started doing it. So I think part of it was a lot of practice and a lot of experimentation.
And probably observation, right? Because like talented people know a lot, but they don't know everything. So, but the way they learn very often is by just observing and experimenting, right? I mean,
and practicing. I would just throw myself in situations not knowing what I was going to do or how to do it, and just do it. And I got better by doing it. I didn't sort of get a degree in it and then go do it. I just did it. I just kept saying yes and getting as much practice in as I could. So I would just go do events for free and paint 100 children in my neighborhood. And figured out, oh, that's how you paint a cat on their face.
Is there any price you've paid over the years?
Is there what?
Is there any, do you have any regrets? Is there any kind of price to pay that maybe that's uncomfortable for you? Or how do you this is kind of a weird question I'm asking, but
I feel like my life has been really rich and really wonderful. I think I just would have traveled more, honestly, and I traveled a lot. But no, I mean, I feel pretty happy, and I try not to look back. I really try to be in the moment, like what's now, I try to be positive and optimistic. Looking back doesn't do me any good, and looking forward doesn't do me any good. I think.
So James, then we can't ask her our last question, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up, Liz?
I'm Karen Hoyer's partner on stage.
Yay!
I'm never growing up. I can't grow up.
Good. A good answer. This has been a wonderful conversation, Liz. Thank you so much for joining us on the Mime Radio Show podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. That's it, ladies and gentlemen, the Mime Radio Show. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Mime Radio Show podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe. Please join us in 2 weeks for an interview with Daniel Bausch.